Hello friends, this is Team SuperSimplified and today we are here with Economic Survey 2017 Chapter 1. So let's get started. So before starting, we would like to give you some introduction because this is Chapter 1. So first question which arises in every aspirant's mind is Economic Survey important? So if you ask me, I would say it is a very important document. But the natural argument is that since I am reading a lot of economics books already, so what is the relevance of Economic Survey there? I would say, see, the difference between reading any textbook and Economic Survey is the difference between watching football and playing it. Okay. So you see things in action in economic survey. You get involved, you understand the philosophy behind various government schemes, and you understand their outcomes in the past and what has been the result and how the policy is being evolving over the period of time. So these things are only possible when you read economic survey, right? So why is the government moving away from a certain policies, and why are they adopting certain measures which were not seen before? We have seen demonetization recently. So what were the reasons? What was building up in the background which led to such a step, right? So these are the things which you will understand once you read economic survey, and it provides you a 360-degree view of the current state of economy. Okay, and moreover, it is a official document, so the facts and figures are well researched and they have a high probability of being asked in examination. You can quote them in your answers in the mains papers as well. Now another question which arises is, what should I take away from the economic survey, because this is a very bulky and voluminous document. This year's economic survey has come in more than 300 pages. So when I read such a bulky document, what is the takeaway from there? See, I would divide the economic survey into three parts. You have three parts basically there. You have the philosophy part of it, where they talk about the various problems in the economy and what has been done in the past to address those problems, and how the results were seen and how the policies have evolved after receiving the feedback, right? And then comes the second part, which is the facts. You see a lot of facts there. So these are a lot of interesting facts and a lot of credible facts which you can quote in your mains answers to support your argument, right? And third part is a lot of graphs and charts are available which give you very useful insights into the state of economy, right? Most important thing is the philosophy and the facts, right? So these are two most important things here which are to be taken care of. So we have taken care of everything in this lecture series, so just go through it. And most importantly, what you can do here is there's a recap slide in the end, so you can just take those notes, or you can just take a printout of that and keep it somewhere, so that when you are revising, this recap slide will be very important. So let's get started. So first of all, some introduction on economic survey. It is a review of the economic development in Indian economy over the past 12 months. Okay, so who publishes it? It is published by the Chief Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Finance. Present Chief Economic Advisor is Arvind Subramaniam. Okay, and what does it contain? It basically contains three parts. First one is the performance in major development programs, how the government has performed in the previous year. Number two, the policy initiatives by the government, new policies. And the third one, prospects of Indian economy, right? So what is in the short term and medium term. In this year's economic survey, they have done a lot of experiments, and one of the experiments is that before starting the chapter 1, they have given 8 interesting facts about India, right? So we will be going through these interesting facts first before going to chapter number 1. So these are the 8 interesting facts. Number 1, Indians on the move. So this fact says that work related annual migration is of the order of 9 million in India, and the source is Indian Railways. So 9 million people are traveling on an average annually, and this is work related migration. Okay, and these new estimates are based on railways data, and this figure is almost double of what was quoted by a 2011 census. Coming to point number 2, biases in perceptions. So it says that the rating agencies have a biased view about China and India, for example. So it says, if you China's growth pattern, the GDP is declining here, right? If you see India's, there is a growth pattern. If you see China's credit to GDP ratio, it is increasing, which is not good for the economy. And for India, it is under control. So that way Indian economy is doing better. But what we see here is, in December 2010, rating agencies has increased the rating of China from A plus to AA minus, whereas for India it is still BBB minus, triple B minus, right? So this is a kind of bias which is seen in the ratings given by the various international rating agencies. Number 3, the new evidence on weak targeting of social programs. This is very important. Even previous year's economic survey has spoken in detail about this, about the misallocations which are happening in the benefit transfer programs, right? So it says that the welfare spending in India suffers from misallocation. The districts with the most poor, you can see here the districts colored in red, are actually the poorest district of the country. And in the second graph, you can see the shortfall in allocation to the poor. So the people who deserve the most the government support are actually really deprived of that. This is because of a lot of inclusion and exclusion errors are happening in the benefit transfer programs, right? So let's move to point number 4, political democracy. But what about fiscal democracy? Yeah, we have a political democracy, but what about the fiscal democracy? So it says that there are only 7 taxpayers per 100 voters. So our rank is 13 out of, and if we rank ourselves, then we are at 13th place out of 18 of our G20 peers. So let's move to point number 5, India's distinctive demographic dividend. It talks about India's demographic dividend situation, and this is considered one of the boon for India. But it says that more than a boon, it is it is an opportunity. It is not a destiny. That means the youth you have in the country is only beneficial to you, is only helpful to you if it is productive enough, right? So how you equip them with the skills and what is the future roadmap you have decided for them is very important, right? So these are the things which you have to take care of. So in the graph 1, we are comparing India with other emerging markets. We are comparing with Korea, China, Brazil. So on the y-axis you have working to non-working age population. On the x-axis you have the years. So you can see that Korea reached the peak of its demographic dividend somewhere around 1990s to 2010. That is a 20 years to 30 years span, right? So they were on the peak. And similarly for China, it was in 2000s, we can say. So what about India here? For India, peak of demographic dividend is coming very late. There's a gap of around 20 to 30 years, so it is coming after 20 to 30 years as compared to these countries, but it is going to last longer because you can see there's no cliff or a peak kind of structure here. You have a flattened out plateau kind of structure, so it is going to last for a longer time, though it is not going to be as high as China. And if you compare the states within India, then the peninsular region will see peak of demographic dividend in the earlier stages than the other hinterland states. Point number 6, India trades more than China and a lot within itself. So here you have 2 graphs. The first one is trade as a percentage of GDP. So here you can see the red line shows India's statistics. So our trade as a percentage of GDP is quite higher than China. So India is kind of open economy now after 1991 LPG reforms. And if you see the internal trade also as a percentage of GDP, India has a respectable position. So if we compare with other countries like USA, Brazil, China, so we are at a good position here. So we trade a lot more than China and a lot within ourselves, right? Internal trade. Point number 7, divergence within India. So there's a spatial dispersion in income and the trend is rising. The blue color line you see here is representing India and it is moving on the higher side, so it is increasing. The diversity is increasing. Now point number 8 is property tax potential unexploited. So here if you see this figure shows the spatial urban built up extent in Bengaluru. So the red color region is the built up area, but the property tax which is collected is only 5% to 10% as a source of funding the municipalities, right? So it says there's a lot of untapped potential lying there in the area of property tax. Now let's start chapter number 1. The title of the chapter is Economic Outlook and Policy Challenges. So basically we will be seeing what is the economic scenario in India, in the world, and how are we doing, how we have done in the past year, and what is the outlook for the medium and the long term with the help of some figures and charts, right? So first of all, in order to set the context right, we should see the economic landscape. So what is the situation around us right now? And what are the major developments inside and outside the country which are going to impact the economic scenario of the country? So it says that robust macroeconomic stability was seen in the previous years. And if you talk about the major developments, then 2 major developments have happened in the country. First of all, the GST bill was passed. So what is the aim here? What is the purpose here? What are we trying to do? We are trying to build a common national market which was missing till now and improve tax compliance and governance. And it will also boost investment and growth. Right, so this is about the GST. This is a major development within the country. Another major development was demonetization, which was announced on 8th November 2016. So why was it done? What were the objectives behind that? First of all, to punitively raise the cost of illicit activities like stashing of the black money. And point number 2, it has a lot of long-term benefits and the digitalization of the economy and increasing the tax bracket and all those things, right? So we will discuss about this in the 3rd chapter in detail with all the statistics and the figures. It will be very interesting. Now if we go to the international front, then there are 2 major developments. And the first one is Brexit and the second development is the US elections, right? So these are 2 things. How are they going to impact us? We'll see in the forthcoming slides. Now let's come to demonetization. So let's list out the expected benefits out of demonetization first of all. So it is supposed to curb corruption, fight counterfeiting of the currency, and to hamper the money supply for the anti-national and terrorist activities, and to tackle the accumulation of the black money, right? But everyone is not convinced that this is going to happen. So there are a lot of people who are debating, who are arguing that no, this is not sure that we are going to achieve these targets. Why? Because they are questioning the entire process. They are questioning it in three dimensions. First of all, they are questioning the aspects of management, the way it was announced and the way the exercise was, entire exercise was carried out, right? And another worry is about the economic impact in the short term and the long term. So is it really going to give those benefits or not, right? And the third step is, how does it align with the long term vision of the Indian economy, right? So how this step fits in into that particular vision and what we have already done in this direction. So here the broader conclusion is that the demonetization will create some short term costs, and it will definitely provide some long run benefits. So short term costs in the form of the inconvenience and the hardships, but there are long term benefits also in terms of the reduced corruption, greater digitalization of the economy, and there will be increased flow of financial savings, and there will be a greater formalization of the economy, and all of which could eventually lead to higher GDP growth, better tax compliance, and greater tax revenues, right? And there were a lot of other measures which were taken recently. Let's talk about them. These are less talked about points. The point number one, packages to assist the clothing sector. So there were a lot of SOPs which were given recently to the clothing sector. Why are we focusing there? Because it is export oriented sector and it is very labor intensive, and that too female employment gets a boost once we invest more in the clothing sector. So government of India is now taking care of this very diligently. Now point number two, unified payment interface was launched by National Payment Corporation of India, and this is going to increase the financial inclusion, and this will help in interoperability of the payment platforms. Okay, so this is further going to help in the digitalization of the economy and bringing a lot of transactions into the formal net. Now coming to the third point, a lot of FDI reforms have taken place. A lot of FDI norms were changed, and the automatic route was followed for most of the things. Even in the defense sector, you have 49% FDI by automatic route and 100% through approval. And India has become one of the largest destination for foreign investment, right? So these are the other measures which were taken recently. But everything is good, everything is fine. Okay, these steps are taken by the government, and government is working for the betterment of the economy. That is all well. But the problem is there are a lot of issues which are still existing, and we need to address them as soon as possible. So first one is reducing the inefficient distribution. There are a lot of benefit programs, there are a lot of subsidy programs, there are a lot of social security programs which are going on, and money is transferred to the beneficiaries. And another challenge here is to strengthen the state capacity in delivering essential services like health and education, and to regulate the market, right? And third point is to overcome the ambivalence about protecting property rights and embracing the private sector. So all these points we are going to discuss in detail in the coming chapters, but just have a look that what are the issues pertaining to Indian economy right now. Point number 4 is boost in export sector is required, because if you want to achieve a growth rate of 10%, then we should have 15 to 20% increase in our exports, right? Now let's move to the next slide. Here we are talking about the global context. So the US fiscal and monetary policy after elections has changed, and it is going to impact the capital flow to India also, right? So we may see along with some of the developing nations, the fly away of the capital. Another important issue it is talking about is the political carrying capacity of the globalization. It is telling that the era for globalization is kind of over, and countries are moving towards protective regimes, and they are increasingly becoming close, as we have seen recently in the case of Brexit, right? So that is what is happening now. USA has exited from TPP and TTIP. So what is the problem here? The problem is India's prospects for export are decreasing because of that. The first reason was the economic meltdown in 2008 and the repercussions thereafter, and now another reason is that the countries are becoming close, right? So they are relying more on the internal trade now than trading with other countries. Another important issue in the global context is the rise of the dollar and impact on China. So yuan is falling as compared to dollar. So what will happen to India is that India's export competitiveness will go, because the rupee will rise against yuan, right? So this is to be checked. Now let's move to the next slide. Review of developments in 2016-17. What is the internal position? So internal position is judged by the GDP growth. So you have two graphs here. This is the GDP growth on constant prices, and this is GDP growth on current prices. So constant prices, if you see, then in 2016-17, in the first half of the year, it is somewhere around 7.2%, which is on lower side of the projected growth, 7 to 7.5 in the previous year economic survey, and it is falling as compared to the second half of 2015-16 and the first half of 2015-16. But still, it is in a respectable limits, we can say. And at the current prices, if you see, then it is somewhere around 11%, right? So the problem here was the low level of investment in the private sector, which led to the reduction of the spending by the businesses. But it was kind of partly offset by the increased government consumption due to 7th Pay Commission and partial revival of exports due to demand lift in the developed countries. So it has fallen a bit, but not that much. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Another parameter to judge the internal position of the country is the WPI versus CPI trend, so the inflation trend. So here we have CPI statistics on the red line, the green line shows the WPI, and the blue line is CPI core inflation, right? So the two distinctive features which you can see here is that consumer price index has shown a downward trend, so the inflation is decreasing. This is because of partially because of the good monsoon which we have seen, so lower food prices, especially the pulse prices, were actually observed in the previous past. And the second trend is that the WPI is rising, right? It was in the negative territory for quite some time, and now it is again rising, and it has come within the positive figures, right? So the gap between the CPI and the WPI is reduced. And core inflation, if you see, then core inflation has however been some kind of stable only, we can say, hovering around 4.5% to 5% range, right? Okay, so this is the inflation trend of the economy. Now let's move to the next slide. External sector, what about the external sector, about trade and current account deficit and all that? So if we talk about the current account deficit as a percentage of GDP, then for 2016-17 it was only 0.3% of GDP, which is a very good figure. Then coming to the second graph, here they have plotted the foreign exchange revenue in US dollars. Okay, we saw a rise in the reserves, and now presently the reserves are US dollars 360 billion. And if you see the third graph, then it shows a trend in the capital inflows, the FDI and FPI. So if we talk about the net inflow of FDI, then it has risen from 1.7% of GDP in 2015 to 3.2% of GDP in 2016. So there is a rise here again. Okay, so this is also a positive figure. So if we talk about the external sector, it looks healthy. Current account deficit has reduced, the foreign exchange reserves looks good, and India is a very popular destination for FDI, right? Let's move to the next slide. Review of development in 2016-17 external sector. There's another figure here about the private remittances in US dollars billion. So here we can see there is a downward trend, and why is that? Because most of the remittances in India are received from the oil producing countries, and since the oil prices have declined and they are all-time low for quite some time, then that is why the economies are not doing good. That's why the remittances from the Indian workers living in that country and working there are actually falling. Now let's move to the other slide. So here it shows the fiscal trends. The fiscal deficit of the center has decreased continuously over the past few years, and now in 2016-17 you can see the figure is somewhere around 3.5% of GDP. So fiscal deficit is also under control. Okay, and this is mainly because the tax collection has increased because of the higher excise duty, and the non-tax revenue has fallen because of the lower returns from the spectrum sale and the disinvestment. But the net effect is such that the fiscal deficit is under control. If we talk about the fiscal deficit of the states as a percentage of GDP, then that has also declined as compared to 2015. But there was another scheme which was introduced, Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana, in which the state government had to take over the debt of power transmission companies in the form of bonds. So because of that, the deficit is showing a little upward trend. So the red graph shows you the fiscal deficit of the states with Uday burden included, right? And the blue color is without Uday. So that is how the trend looks like. It is quite healthy trend. We can see as a nationwide, and if we see the states also. So in this aspect also, the Indian economy is doing good. So now we have seen the previous year statistics. Now let's focus on what is coming ahead. So what is the outlook for 2017-18? So if we talk about the real GDP prospects, then we need to examine each of these components of aggregate demand, exports, consumption, private investment, government. So in export, we can say that it is recovering because of the pickup in global economy, and recently IMF has projected that there will be a 3.4% growth in 2017-18 against 3.1% in 2015-16. So given the elasticity of Indian real export growth to global GDP. So definitely even India's export is going to increase, and that will help in the growth of the GDP. Right. And what about the consumption? The consumption will also get a boost. So this is also on a higher side. 7th pay commission is already announced and implemented. Private investment may not recover much. That is what the economic survey says. So this is on the downward side. I'll put the government savings may actually go away because of oil prices. So since the oil prices may rise, the government's savings may dwindle again, may decline again. So two trends are on the downward side and two trends are on the upward side. Right. Now, what are the risks here? There are some risks. For example, the effects of demonetization. We don't know, how internally it has affected the economy, and so this is kind of uncertain. But this is now very certain that it has not impacted much negatively. So we can just. So this is one of the risks. Economic survey talks about the effects of demonetization, and oil prices are going to rise in the near future. So that may also lead to the advantage which India was having because of the low oil prices may go away. And the third thing is the trade tensions among the major countries may lead to the capital flight from the emerging markets including India, right? And India's export opportunities may get narrowed down. That is also one risk. And what are the opportunities? There's one strong opportunity here which talks about the global demand is increasing, so our export prospects may increase in the near future, right? So these are this is the outlook for 2017-18 as per the real GDP growth. Now let's come to the fiscal outlook side of it. So it says, economic survey says that be ready for a decrease in the tax to GDP ratio because the oil windfall may vanish slowly. And point number 2, windfall from unreturned high denomination notes and increased disclosure under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. But we have not seen any windfall from the unreturned high denomination notes because almost all the currency has come back to the banks. That is what we are hearing, right? And according to government statistics also. So this thing is not going to help much, and we have to see that Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, it is a income disclosure scheme. So how much it is going to help us, right? How many people are coming ahead and declaring their lack money? And point number 3, the GST implementation will boost tax compliance and collections. Yeah, that is expected to help in the GDP growth. And the third point, macroeconomic policy stance. So it says that the market interest rates will be lower in 2017-18 because due to the higher level of deposits in the banks after demonetization. Hence, a scope of monetary policy easing is available. And it talks about fiscal policy. This point is very important. It talks about some of the reforms which are required in near future. It talks about strategic disinvestment of the public sector undertakings, of tax reforms, subsidy rationalization, then public sector asset reconstruction company. It talks about the labor reforms. It talks about the poor targeting on expenditure side, and it talks about a very interesting topic called universal basic income, which we will be reading in the coming slides. Right, so let's move ahead. So now we have seen the past year performance, which is quite healthy, and we have also looked at the outlook for 2017-18, which also looks very promising, right? So let's move to the next part. In the next part and the last part of the chapter 1, economic survey talks about the 5 urgent issues which India needs to address. The first one is redistribution, universal basic income. So it says that there are around 950 plus centrally sponsored schemes which cost 5% of GDP to the government, right? And the problem here is there's a lot of misallocation going on there because there is a exclusion and inclusion error. Exclusion because a lot of genuine people, a lot of deserving people are not in the beneficiary list of the government, and inclusion error because a lot of people who don't deserve those benefits are actually receiving them. Okay, so we have seen already that the poorest districts in the country are actually the most neglected districts. So now what is the solution for this problem? So it says that since the problem is arising because of exclusion and inclusion errors, because we are not able to identify the beneficiary properly, so why don't we give this benefit to everyone unconditionally without putting any condition? So there will not be any exclusion or inclusion error. The money will go to all. So it talks about a universal basic income. So what is universal basic income? It is a form of social security where an unconditional income transfer is made by the government to its citizens. But it is a controversial topic, but it is a controversial subject. Debates are still going on all over the world whether this is good for the economy or not, right? And we have recently seen that Finland has recently implemented basic income on an experimental basis, not full-fledged, and they will be doing this 2-year trial period where they will be transferring $600 to 2,000 randomly selected citizens, and if this experiment is successful, then this will be implemented across the country. And recently one referendum was also conducted in Switzerland where the citizens have rejected it, the proposal of basic income, by 76% votes. People don't like it. Okay, so let's see how it turns out in India's case. So this is just an idea which Economic Survey is putting forward, substantiating it with the help of some observations and facts and figures that we will see in detail in the coming chapters. Okay, and the second topic it is talking about is the exchange rate policy. It says that we have to monitor our exchange rate policy very closely because dollar is rising and other currencies such as Chinese yuan are falling. So what happens? So rupee is appreciating against yuan, so yuan is becoming cheaper. When the currency becomes cheaper, the exports are very competitive, so Chinese competitiveness in the export sector will increase as compared to India, right? So our exports will be less competitive, right? So not only China, even Vietnam, Bangladesh and Philippines are strong contenders in terms of exports, right? So we have to control the exchange rates in such a way that our exports remain competitive. Okay. Now, point number 3 is the trade policy. So here Economic Survey is saying that if you talk about the global scenario today, then there is a wave of deglobalization which is happening now. So a lot of protectionist measures are being taken by the countries the world over, and the problem here is India needs open markets because we need around 15 to 20% rise in our exports if we want to see 10% GDP growth in the near future. So for this we need openness of the world market. So if this trend of deglobalization is taking momentum, then India is going to lose on this export front. That is what it is talking about, and it is also talking about the two opportunities. The first one is the free trade agreement with UK, European Union, to promote labor intensive textile sector. So that is a possibility. And another thing is USA has quit TTIP in European Union and TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership in Asia. So now India can contribute in strengthening WTO, World Trade Organization. Now point number 4, it talks about the climate change in India. Recently Paris Agreement has taken place in December 2015, and the final conclusion there is that we should price the carbon. Okay, but the thing is the crude oil prices are all-time low, so the consumption will definitely be very high. But what India has done, India has not passed the benefit of low prices to the consumer, so our emissions are under control. So we can say that India has actually applied an implicit carbon tax. The excise duty on petrol has increased after the fall of the international oil prices. So that is one thing, implicit carbon tax. And another thing is the reliance of India on fossil fuels is very low for our range of GDP. You can see from the graph here, this is the implicit carbon tax we are talking about. This red line is actually the standard norm, and India is far above this particular norm for all brands of product, right, for diesel and petrol both. So we have already taken care of the carbon tax which controls the usage of these fossil fuels, and our reliance on fossil fuels is very low as compared to other economies. If you see, US in 1900 itself was above our level. So India is doing good on climate change front as well. So India's commitment towards fight against climate change is evident from these statistics. Now let's come to the 5th point. It talks about ensuring women's privacy. In each of the last 2 years, the Economic Survey has focused on a dimension of concern to the women. In 2015 financial year, it highlighted the violence against women, which is related to coercive family planning methods. And in 2016, in the last year Economic Survey, it spoke about the mother and child, which emphasized that a healthy mother can only give birth to a healthy child. So health of the mother is very important. So it is talking about the women related issues in every edition. In this edition, they are talking about women's privacy. So they are talking basically about open defecation, right? So there is a strong relationship between the sanitation practices and the health outcomes. So there were a lot of reports which spoke that in the areas where the open defecation is high, the stunting takes place, wasting of the children, right? There will be a lot of communicable diseases in that area. So these are all well documented, but still open defecation is not coming down. According to Census 2011, more than 50% of the Indian population defecates in open. In the context of women, then there's a threat to life and safety. And another new dimension they are talking about is the reduction in the food and water intake, because the women have to minimize the need to exit the house to use the toilet, so they reduce the food and water intake, which impacts their health in the long run. So let's see these things with the help of statistics. So lack of toilets, what is the impact on women? These are the impacts. They have to travel long distances, the risk of sexual assault, withholding of the food and water intake. So these are the impacts, right? So this is a very important figure and very interesting chart which talks about these issues. So they have done a survey and they've collected all these figures and they have presented in this format. Now if we talk about the usage of toilets by men and women, then usage of toilets is more with women. So this in turn gives legitimacy to the Swachh Bharat program. So Swachh Bharat program is not just about that you should not dump the waste in the open because it doesn't look nice. It's because there are a lot of economical impacts, there are a lot of economic cost, there's a lot of social cost which we have to pay. That dimension only is being highlighted by these statistics, right? Now let's move to point number 6. India soon to recede demographic dividend. So it says that 2016 was a turning point in the world history because the combined working age population of all developing countries declined in 2016. And if you see India is in a sweet spot because we have not yet reached our peak of demographic dividend, right? But it says that demography is an opportunity, it is not a destiny, right? So we have an opportunity and we have to encash that. That's when it is going to help us, otherwise it is just an opportunity lost. Okay, now this graph here shows the ratio of working age to non-working age population. So here if you see there are two distinct features in India's case. The first thing is India has not yet achieved the peak of its demographic dividend. It is going to come somewhere around 2020 and it will last up to 2050, so for around 3 decades. And the thing and when you compare it with other countries, then you can see that it is going to last longer, right? If you see in the case of China it was only about 1 decade, but in the case of India it is going to be sustained for a longer period of time, but it is not going to be that high. If you see China it is somewhere around 2.3 or 2.4, but for India it is going to be 1.7, right? What is 1.7? It is a ratio of the working age population to non-working age population. So if you see within India, then the peninsular states are going to achieve the peak in demographic dividend in the early stages and the hinterland states in the later stage. And what is the scenario of total fertility rate? So you can see here as it is decreasing in the other countries, it is decreasing in India also. So the figure here illustrates that all these countries started the post World War II era with roughly the same very high total fertility rate. Okay, so everyone started at the same point, but then the thing was in China and Korea total fertility rate then declined rapidly below the replacement level itself because of the one child policy and all other supporting policies, so causing the share of the working age population to rise until the early 2000s, and then it started to fall. Okay, that is what has happened in China, and now they are reversing their one child policy. And for India also it is decreasing, not at that pace, but it is coming near the replacement level now. What is the replacement level of fertility? It is 2.1. okay, and if you see India and within its states, then the total fertility rate is decreasing here also, and the decrease is more in the peninsular states as compared to the hinterland states. So that's all in this chapter. Let's have a quick recap here. So first of all, we saw 8 facts about India. Then we saw the economic landscape where we spoke about the national level major developments, for example demonetization and GST implementation plan. And then on international level, the major events were Brexit and US elections, which may impact the global economic scenario. Then we had a quick review at 2016-17 outcomes. There we examined the internal position with the help of CPI and WPI figures and the GDP, which looks quite healthy, and the external position also is healthy. Current account deficit is going down and exports is improving. And after reviewing the past, we had a look at the future. What is the outlook for 2017-18? There the real GDP growth prospects are very good. The fiscal policy, some suggestions are given in the fiscal policy aspect. And when we talk about monetary policy, then there's a scope of easing of the monetary policy because the deposits with the bank are going to increase because of demonetization. Then we spoke about 6 important issues, right? Universal basic income, exchange rate policy, trade policy, climate change in India, and ensuring women's privacy, and the last, India's soon to receive demographic dividend, right? So that's all guys, that's all from our side. If you have any suggestions, please put that in the comment sections, and the slides of all these presentations are available in the description section below. You can go to the link and download the slides, and the recap slide is very important. You can just have a printout or something, or have notes of this slide, and you can keep it for your future revision. So we'll meet you with the next chapter in the coming lecture. So thank you, bye bye, see you soon.